she said, and it was kind of scary because they sound just like us. And so like us and them, but everyone uses the same like inflammatory rhetoric, but actually everyone is saying the same thing, just like against the other side. But everyone in the end wants the same things. Like everyone wants security, safety, love, and all these things. What's up, Matt?
Team. What you got?
So, I mean, you know, my favorite YouTube channel is Veritasium. So there's a video that I watched that I really, really loved, and I sent it to you, and I think you watched it too. And I'll talk quickly about what it's about, just, you know, for whoever's listening. But I thought it was such a great video. So we had the US elections like 2 weeks ago, I think, something like that, or maybe a week or two ago. And so the video came out just a few days before, and it really changed my perspective on things. And I think this was super interesting. Even though it's a science video, right? I guess it's a social science video, but I thought it was a really cool demonstration of like some of the human biases, and also made me rethink my own approach to things. So I think it was really cool. So, I mean, you watched the video, but let me just recap real quick. So it starts out with this fake data set where they did like a fake experiment about a skin cream that was supposed to, you know, reduce skin rashes or something. And the data set was just a table that showed like, you know, some people got the cream, some people didn't. And the people that, and then it showed like how many people that from the group that got the cream, did the skin condition improve or worsen? And then, you know, the same for the group that didn't get the skin cream. And then before they asked the people about their opinion about the results, they asked them like how good they are with math. Like gave them like a numeracy score. Right. And then they basically asked them like, so did the cream improve the rash or not? You know, like the numbers were completely made up, so it's kind of irrelevant if it did or not. But there was a correct answer, right? Like, so you do like the proportions, and you find out like I think the skin cream actually made the rash worse, but you know, it doesn't matter. You can flip the numbers, and then it's the other way around. But interestingly, or not super interestingly actually, the people that were better at math got the correct answer usually, and the people that were not so good at math, less so. And now the interesting thing happened. They used the same table with the same numbers, but they changed the question. So instead of asking about skin cream, they asked about very polarizing topics like gun control, abortion, and so on. And what happened then is that people with higher numeracy scores, so people that were better at math or science, tended to ignore what the data actually said and confirm the opinion they already had based on their political beliefs. So, like, you know, this is US centric as often. You know, Democrats would usually read the data as, okay, gun control improves the crimes in different cities, and Republicans would read that as, no, gun control actually makes it worse. And, you know, the data is fake, so it doesn't, you know, it's irrelevant what actually happened. I think the data isn't real data, as far as I understood. But the point was that the political leanings not only define your interpretation of the same data, but also the more intelligent you are, basically, or the more good at math and numbers you are, the more you read the numbers wrong on purpose. So I thought it was super interesting. So what happened to me is that, you know, one, you know, like, because it was like, it's a heated political climate right now in the US, but also everywhere, I think. Like I think it's getting very, very tribal and very extreme. Everyone is like, I don't know, everyone's going more to the extreme of like their political beliefs. And what it made me think is that not only do we all consume different media content, like, you know, we live in our bubbles. Like I think I'm gonna guess, I don't actually know your political beliefs, but like my bubble is more liberal for sure. And so most of the media I see is a little bit more left leaning, I would say. And you know, like I think most of the people in my bubble were pretty upset that Trump won the elections. Spoiler alert if you didn't if you didn't see the elections. But then what I did actually after I watched this video is that I questioned myself on not only the media that I consume, but also am I maybe looking at the same data and same information? You know, it's not even about misinformation, which is a big problem right now. But like, even if we look at the same data, like me and someone with a different belief system, we might come back with different conclusions. And, you know, we have this all the time. Like you and I, we have this all the time. We look at the data and you're like, oh, for sure we have to do this. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. We have to do this. And then it made me wonder, how much do I stick to my guns, no pun intended, when I actually should just be open-minded? And so what I did after watching this is that I actually made myself consume more conservative media, you know, like of some more reasonable folks. And I was like, oh, okay, like you can actually listen to the other side, quote unquote, and come back with a very different opinion about the same kind of data. So I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say, which is great because we're in a podcast. No, I mean, jokes aside, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot for the recap. A few ideas to start with. One is, I think you touch upon a few things. One is related to age. I think the fact that it's interesting how when you grow, the more you get, I guess, biased in a way, because you form ideas, you form your own like identity.
Yeah.
You kind of like get and it's a process that everybody does.
Yeah.
They're on their own, like some more, some less.
Which is also why it gets harder to make friends as you get older, right? Because you don't want to deal with every type of person anymore.
You get stricter. You also get a bit more annoyed faster because whenever you see that like something is not the way you want. So I think age tends to polarize you, which is crazy because in a way, it should be the other way around, because you learn more about the world. So of course you understand more what you like and what not. But also you should understand both sides better. But that goes.
But that's kind of the thing, right? Like, even though we all see more and more information, once we form an opinion, every piece of information we see, we use it to confirm what we already believe.
Yeah, that has to do with ego in a way, because there's this concept. So the concept, the video talks about tribes, right?
Yeah,
at some point it talks about.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because it's true. Like in humankind, like we evolved to live and exist in tribes, right? So there's that primordial rational, and they mention like this is the most rational thing. Like you are part of a tribe. You wanna follow like what the tribe says in a way, and at some point you kind of like turn off your critical reasoning when you're in the tribe, because first of all it's a way of like reducing energy and effort.
Yeah.
It's easier. Like if you buy into a tribe, a group, or any kind of like community, at that point you kind of like not turn off, but maybe tune down the volume of like your own critical reasoning, because it's like,
also
okay,
I think like you have these people that you establish as trustworthy at some point, and then starting, you know, at some point you just accept everything they say as the truth. I think that's the problem with like influencers and media figures and so on.
Right.
And cults, you know, in cults and religions, it's like, oh, if this person says it, then it must be true, so I don't have to think about it.
Right. And in a way, it's natural, because you can't be continuing. It's too much effort to be continuously evaluating everything. And so as soon as you see, okay, this is good enough, I kind of like understand this and I believe in it, let's follow, then it's a natural tendency. And I think it's hard to like combat. And I don't think it's even useful to combat this, because it's ultimately, we're looking, as humans, we look for efficiency, right? Yeah. It's kind of like also natural tendency of being like, if something is efficient enough and works, let me deal with something. And there's so much I have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And so, so I think and politics in a way is kind of the ultimate tribe, right? Like, because it's not once for a specific niche or a specific issue that you might have or something, but it's transversal to everything that you do in life, because politics kind of like governs, it manages it can impact laws, it can impact the way you live your day-to-day life, right? And ultimately it also has this view of the future, right? Because politics is always about like changing for the better, like improving ideally, right? And so So it's interesting. I think one interesting bit that I thought of is why, like when you're younger, politics is really not your biggest concern, right?
Yeah.
Then the more you age, the more you get polarized, you form new ideas and stronger ideas. They kind of get part of your identity as well. Like thinking about the example of the video of gun control. If I own a gun, I would say it decreases crime, right? Just because like I'm a gun owner, like part of my identity is like I own a gun, right? There's a difference between me who I own a gun and somebody who doesn't. Like we made a different decision and it has an impact. Maybe I didn't think of the impact so much, but it has. So I think there's part of like ideology that it's ingrained into like my identity is made of this, this, and this, right? And there's this idea, it's more a psychological concept, but like of a story that we like stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And if I tell myself a story that, oh, I bought a gun because I want to protect my family, then suddenly everybody that doesn't own a gun is kind of like not doing their duty in a way, right? And is not helping the community. And then I see everything, I view everything through that lens. And so that's kind of like a starting point.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think what I always was always striking me as interesting, especially in the United States, is because they have this two-party system. It's almost like, it's almost like in sports, like you have the derby, It's like there's all the other teams that you don't care about, and then there's like your team and like their biggest enemy, right? And all the other teams you couldn't care less, right? And in the States, it's kind of like that. So like it's like these two parties that they have, they kind of encapsulate all the beliefs you're supposed to have about all these different topics. Like, like in the US, the typical thing is like abortion, gun control, immigration, climate, whatever, right? And I'm like, why does it need to be that you're anti-abortion and pro-gun? Like, why do they belong together? They have nothing to do with each other, right? They say like, oh, I'm pro-life and pro-gun. I'm like, but isn't pro-gun anti-life? Like you could argue.
Right.
And then I'm like, why do they need to come together? There's so few people that say, okay, I stand on this side when it comes to gun control, but on this side when it comes to abortion. It's like, because they have these, these kind of like identities that they give themselves, like I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I now need to believe everything that this group of people believes. And it's super interesting. I think it's also super unrational in that sense. I mean, as he says in the video, like it's super rational to want to belong to a group, but it's like you don't actually make up your opinion about all these different things. You pick a few that identify with, and then you just accept everything else from that tribe.
And also, it's an old concept. Like, tribes are still there. They exist. They function like a society, but it's not anymore that it's a live or die problem, right? Like if you can be a bit of both. You can be a bit Republican, a bit Democrat, right? But let's try to, at least my idea is like, let's try to abstract from politics, because I think this is useful. What the video says is interesting in a lot of other areas as well. Like politics is probably the ultimate areas where you easily see that, because people buy into one ideology and then like they go autopilot, right? They stop thinking about is this right or wrong? What does my party say? Okay, then it's right. Or okay, it's wrong.
Yeah, I think it used to be, I think it just shifted what it was, right? It used to be, oh, it's my family, or now it's my village. Now maybe it's my country. That's like, actually, I wanted to like mention something. But it's also like my religious beliefs, right? Like, so we get our values from our family, from our religion. And then, there's like a lot of like holy wars fought about your value system. And oftentimes, like in the sports derby, it's like the religions, the subgroups of religions that are super similar to each other, like the what are they called? The two Muslim branches, like Sunni and what is the other one?
Shiite.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I don't know.
Yeah, but like the Shiites,
I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
I want to say it.
Sunni, Shia. Anyway, so this is kind of the thing, right? They're like on a global level, they're like super, super similar compared to all the other ones, but like there's so many wars between these, Muslim tribes, which is, it's kind of ridiculous. Same for like, I don't know, let's say, Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid, right? They're like both from the same city, but like they have these really strong tribes, and they kind of hate each other, and you see it everywhere.
But it's all about power in the end, right? Like, and it's all about self-serving power, like self-interest and everything. Like these movements, there's an aspect of, I think the two main layers are the necessity of feeding a narrative to the people so that again they can lower the volume of their thinking, and they can go on about their lives. And it's kind of both sides want the same in a way. Like the average person doesn't want to deal with anything. I don't want to say too much of a strong sentence here, but the idea is, like, the feeling I have is that most of people want to deal with their day-to-day and their immediate close issues, right? So, like, I'm not earning enough. I have a health issue. I have like a friends issue. I have a relationship issue, right? Like their immediate circle of issues, because they have the biggest impact in the short term for sure, and also in the long term, you would say, right? So completely understandable. But then there's a series of bigger issues that, and this is a conversation that my group of friends, it's happening because the more you age, the more you kind of, I think, look broader perspective. And so there's this conversation going on like people are not communicating and like exchanging ideas on bigger like topics because they are focused too much. And I'm saying it within my own group of friends, it's happening, right? I'm not saying other people, but like, and I'm doing it, right? But it's true that like we're looking, I include myself. We look at like the immediate issues, like, oh, I have this issue here, I have to deal with that. And then there's this sense of urgency that we talked about in the past as well, like that's mounting every day more, every month more. There's more information, there's more things that you have to do. They're seem urgent but are not. And then so the time for actually reflecting on bigger scale, on like more important themes and problems that don't impact me as a person, but like a community, it decreases. And so that's why I think people tend to go autopilot, because it's like, well, let me find a cause. Like many times, especially looking at the Italian elections, right? Like people I know, we all, a month before the election, look at the programs.
When is the election?
We had it recently, not long ago.
Saying like that one we're totally missing here.
Yeah, but
the American one is all over the news.
Yeah, that's another topic, right? But the thing is, a month before, 2 months before, a few that were like they're into it every day, like they're looking, maybe because they're working related to politics or they're it's really one of their interests and they're looking outwards on that. They like a month or two before we started looking at the programs. So like, okay, which one should I vote for, right? And the conversation was more like, okay, this is saying this is saying that. And then between saying and doing, we know in politics there's another problem, right? But at least should I vote like for the one that like has the most, the program that's closer to my ideology, right? And so if you go in detail and you look at the programs, then you can form an idea. But then we do it like 1 or 2 months before. I think the programs also don't get out from each political party like much earlier. So there's also that. But the thing is, it's kind of like so reduced in terms of the time frame spent on this kind of reasoning, and so it's a constant effort. If one wants to like think about climate change, the wars that are happening and why they're happening, what's happening, right, and the everything related to the economy side of things, right? There's a lot going on, and because it's all connected. And now you not only look at like what's happening in your country, but also what's happening globally, because it affects your country, because everything is connected, right? Economy is connected and wars have an impact as well, right? So then I think that's the escape. The escape is like, okay, I don't want to deal with all of these things. I already have my own problems. Let me figure out one sure path that I think it's good enough. And I think in a way it's normal. So to connect it back to the initial point is this is happening, and I think we can't really get rid of it, right? Like it's a normal human tendency of like finding kind of shortcuts in a way. But there might be,
And so I mean, I think you're right that this plays a role. I was just thinking more about so you're basically saying this is a way for us to kind of escape more decision making, right? Which we talked about in the past. And, making up your opinion, because that takes a lot of mental bandwidth.
Right.
Which I think is true. But I think the point of the video was like this whole need for belonging, right? Which we all have. And I think the more globalized the world becomes, the less everyone feels like they belong to anything. And I definitely have this myself, right? Like you and I were both people that moved a lot. We talked about this in the past. I personally, even though I'm German, I don't feel particularly German. Like I don't super identify with the culture here. And I think, actually, this is actually super interesting to cut myself off here. I watched a Johnny Harris video also like a week or so ago, or maybe two, about the idea of nationalism. I don't know if it came across your feed.
No. Okay.
So what was super interesting, so the topic is kind of similar, right? It's about like, why do we feel like we're part of a nation? Like what brings us together? And in the video, he kind of explained the history of like nations and nationalism and where it all came from. And basically the whole premise of the video is that the idea of nations and nationalism is only about 100 years old. Like before, there was no such thing as nations. Like, you can go in old history books and there will be like a nation, but it was only like on paper. Like no one, like there was no Italian person like 100 years ago. Actually, for Italy, he made like very concrete examples. He says like, I'm taking this from the video. I know nothing about Italian history, but he said that up to like the 1950s, only like 10% of what is now Italy even spoke Italian.
So, there are. Italy is an example where the history goes that like regions were like independent. A lot of regions were independent,
exactly.
So they were not really functioning as a country. And then you had dialects that were prominent in each region, and we still have dialects, but we now speak like a unique language as well. Yeah, but I see your point. It's a good point. Like the sense of belonging is one of like it's functional for survival, right? So it's really primordial, I think, need that we have. But then the question, looking at this as like what can change, because one of the things that they mentioned in the video, which I really liked, is the idea of like, as you said, different like these sides, the different sides, they really don't speak that much differently. They're polarized in the conclusion, but
I really liked what this one woman said. I think she was a Trump supporter, if I don't, misremember. And she said, "Oh, I attended this Zoom call of the other side." She just said the other side. I assume she was a Trump supporter, but I don't know. And she said, and it was kind of scary because they sound just like us. And so like us and them, but everyone uses the same like inflammatory rhetoric, but actually everyone is saying the same thing, just like against the other side. But everyone in the end wants the same things. Like everyone wants security, safety, love, and all these things. But everyone,
it's true.
Yeah. So this was super interesting. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Like I just want
to
mention.
No, I mean, it's true. It's great. Like the goals are the same, right? But the way we go, we're thinking we're gonna reach the goals is different, right? And it all comes down to information. And the problem that these days, before in the past, we used to have state level information, right? Like managed by the state, controlled by the state, which I
don't even know if that's a good one. Also,
because, pros and cons, for sure. But at least it in a way, there was some vetting. Right now, the problem more and more, there's this shift happening from have you been following this problem with Twitter, like decreasing like basically usage on Twitter is plummeting because people are migrating to Blue Sky.
And I saw that actually just today. I think it's also, that's the problem is that mostly I think liberal people are migrating away and the conservative people are staying.
That's right, but then there's this whole thing that's coming up. It's like, what does it mean that like Elon Musk basically bought Twitter for his agenda on like basically shifting, like basically controlling the narrative for the elections, and then now it's letting it go. If you think about like not to get too much entangled in the Elon Musk concept, but everything that he did business wise, most like 90% of the things that he did were, unless there were jokes like the flame tower thing, but they were like taking companies that existed or creating new companies and really trying to create disruptive innovation, right?
Which he claims he wants to do with the American government now.
Right. But Twitter was not one of them. The goal that he set himself when he bought it was like the one he claimed was like, I want to save free speech because it's in danger. In reality, what it looks like it's happening is that he controlled the algorithm so that like it was basically it was a promotion platform for him and his ideas, right?
I mean, here again, I think we have to be careful not to say just what we hear somewhere, because I think first of all, we don't know what he wants, right? We have no idea. And like, I think based on what media we consume, we have an opinion based on what the media says that he wants, because he could have a trillion different reasons for buying Twitter. And I think one might be what you said, but another might be just that he wants, I mean, this is what he says a lot, that he wants to build like an everything app, like WeChat or something that has like, payments and direct messages and, all these other things. And also another reason could be just like his whole Grok thing, Grok AI, like, because it's a lot of like text data, That's another reason.
Yeah. I mean, this is all, and
I don't think it's stupid.
Claiming,
like, it's like,
I was nobody's saying that, and I was not claiming that he actually did it for that. Like, he actually used it as a this is what's coming out as a possibility. I'm not saying that I don't know.
Yeah, he might also change what he uses it for over time. Like maybe he's like, okay, I'll use it for this now, and then
for sure. But there was not like, because he's probably the smartest businessman alive. Actually, probably yes.
The smartest successful businessman, yeah. Maybe
right.
If you,
so what you would say is that, okay, this happening, it's kind of like going against the smart approach, right? Like, he wouldn't let this happen. So the fact that this is happening is maybe he has a bigger
there's
purpose.
Some stuff we don't know yet. Yeah, maybe he has bigger
Maybe
goals,
there's a bigger purpose, but still, like, it's sacrificing company basically for what it was. Now, besides that, the point is that this problem of the new news sources, it is an issue, and whoever controls it changes the narrative, and especially if it has a wide adoption like Twitter had. And now it's very hard. I think the biggest problem with news is related to factual news or not factual news, right? Being able to say, given also what's happening with AI and the fact that like now you can make artificially things that look every day more real, right? There is a bigger challenge that's coming up, which is like, we won't be able to figure that out ourselves. And so we need to trust. This level of trust and belonging goes back to like, we need to have a source of news that is trustable and that we feel like, and if the more this is impartial, the better, because it removes this polarization, right? Because ultimately it's not a changing party. Like, let's say today I say I'm a Democrat, and then I want changing to like becoming a Republican. It's not something that you do one day to another, right? It's a progress. Like, I'm sure that people that change their mind on issues, it was like a constant, almost passive, like, exposure to signals that told them what you believe is wrong. Because ego or non-ego, like, the problem is that you don't change your mind that quickly, because it's hard to do it. You have to like reevaluate. So it's a constant process, and news is one of the best way to change your mind, because every day you consume some news, and if the news goes in one direction, little by little you're persuaded that actually is the correct one, right?
Yeah, but I mean the problem still persists, because we don't know that the news is unbiased, neutral, objective, right? We don't know that.
But you can go back to, and taking the Elon Musk idea of like physics principle, you can go back to first principles and say, okay, what is true and what's not in terms of facts.
There's two problems with that. First of all, as you said, it's hard to find facts these days. Like, it's hard to be sure about anything. And we don't have the mental bandwidth. You already said that. Like, we don't have the time to check everything. We can't. Like, there's no possibility. And like, you write, like, if there's a science paper that comes out, are we going to the lab and doing the same experiment just to be sure it's not a lie, right? And so I think this gets very complex. And, and on top of that is the thing from the Veritasium video, that even when presented with the same actual facts, people make up their mind differently based on selective perception.
Okay, but that's I think there are two issues. So to answer on issue number one, just an idea, right? So you have you have something that Twitter introduced were the community nodes, which were great idea, because community nodes kind of like had the purpose of like demystifying something, like, or basically
was this
giving.
Pre or post Elon?
I think Elon introduced it, right?
Okay, can you say a sentence about how it works? Because I don't know.
Community nodes basically allows for, it's like what happens with Wikipedia. Like it allows for, like, let's say somebody shares a tweet, I post a tweet, and then people from the audience can actually add their own comment saying, like, basically disproving or not, like augmenting the tweet with factual information, right?
I think that's good, yeah.
And it's peer reviewed, like it's not something, I don't know if it's exactly peer reviewed, but the concept is
like,
like,
it's crowd reviewed, I think.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually potentially better, because I mean, this is a completely different topic, but I have a big problem with the current peer review system in science, because it's not as neutral and objective as people make it sound. And it's actually, I think it's kind of broken, honestly. But I think Wikipedia, for example, is a very trustworthy source of information right now, and it's crowd. Right.
Wikipedia is amazing. I mean, it has its own blind side for sure, but nothing is perfect. But it is amazing because it manages to provide a good source of truth. And by the way,
I think mass intelligence is sometimes better than sometimes. I don't know how often, but like sometimes it's better than specialist intelligence. Like there's this. Sorry, this is like again another tangent. But do you know this like story of the guy that wanted to gift an ox to whoever guessed the weight of the ox? I don't know if it's a real story or a fake story, but it's like maybe a parable from the Greek mythology or something. And like everyone guessed the weight wrong, but then someone came and like took the average of all the guesses, and it was like spot on. It was like exactly the right weight. I think I think crowd intelligence or swarm intelligence is like not to be underestimated.
Yeah, crowd intelligence is great. And we have a working example, which is rare, right? That actually works. On the other hand...
What was that? Which is what?
Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a great example of crowd intelligence. And now, so I think we're one step, one step far from actually implementing a solution. Because on the other hand, you have... And why? Wikipedia is based on facts. I think where Wikipedia falls short and crowd intelligence falls short is... innovation, meaning like anything that's new, unfortunately, we don't have that much information. New discoveries, anything that actually comes up as new, we don't have enough information to evaluate whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, right? It's like the same when with like nutrition research, right? And science is on the verge of that. And so many times Wikipedia kind of like doesn't take a side, because it's like, we have some people that research and found this, other people research and found that. And so it doesn't, but at least it brings all the information so one can take their own decision, right?
Like, you would like to add a layer of crowd opinion, right?
What I would like to do is connect, because many things are actually history related. They're not like, so you can distinguish news between, oh, this happened, to news related to, okay, this is something that I propose that I think it will help, or something new, right? So past or present and future. So present and future, very hard, I think, for Wikipedia to provide, or any crowd. Crowd can do it, but it might not be ideal as a solution. But still, it's better than not having it, the crowd opinion, let's say. But related to the past, we all have the information. Like a lot of things that history, it's not perfect what we know about it, but like the closer the history, the more we know about it, right? The older the history, the harder. So many times people claim things that can be easily disproved by like checking history, right? And I think that connection between a crowdsourced intelligence like Wikipedia, taking Wikipedia and other like that, right? And news sources is the right. And by the way, AI can easily do that. There's no need for fact checking made up by a human, which would be like super labor intensive considering the amount of tweets and posts on social media that are created, right? But having this layer, this extra information coming from a source that like actually automatically fact checked it would be very interesting.
Yeah, we still need, the problem is we still need trust. It always goes back to like whoever does the fact checking, or even the AI that does it, like we need trust in that AI. And you can you can argue maybe dystopian ways. You can say whoever controls the big AI in the world will be able to shape information. And I think state-sponsored media is like such a good example of this, because I don't want to go too much into personal examples from my friend circles, but like I have some friends that based on the country they grew up in, they have very different opinions about certain historical facts. And I'm like, wow, that's actually crazy, because I thought we all agree on this, but we don't. And, I mean, if you've been to China, you know this, but like every country has it to some extent. I think everyone is a little bit brainwashed from their own history books. And I think it's not that easy, because like based on where you grew up, like I think the history books in, let's be super extreme and say North Korea, they will say something completely different from the history books in South Korea, right? This is clear. And some AI, I mean, let's not do North Korea because it's unlikely, but like some AI trained on Chinese media or maybe the state AI in China will give you very different fact checks than some American one, right? I think that seems very clear to me. So in the end, it comes back to trust.
Right, but but we have to start from something, taking it as a good ground, right? If Wikipedia is considered a good ground, Wikipedia, what are the traits there? Like it is.
But like for example, I think China, for example, will disagree that Wikipedia is a good source of information.
Okay, but then we get back to square one, where it's like, okay, nobody agrees on anything.
But that is kind of the problem.
Okay,
right?
But then if that's the case, you have to go back. So I see two approaches. At least that's an opinion, right? Like I see two approaches. One is like this of like crowd intelligence, and then with innovations you can't really take, or new ideas or anything new, like you can't really take aside yet because you don't have enough information. So you stay and see, and then as soon as you have it, like crowd intelligence kicks in a way. But at least like it removes a problem. Otherwise, you go the other way around and you look at the end results. You start from the end and not from the what we know, but what we want, right? And if we take the idea of we want the same, right? Meaning like we want to be safe, then you kind of like reverse engineer, like what do you need to get there? And I think this is a common conversation, like a shared conversation, and it's not, unfortunately, it's more active, right? You don't have to, you're not based on any previous knowledge, but you kind of like start from like the end in mind. Yeah. And so it requires everybody's effort on like, okay, you want this. And so what do you think is the solution? So which goes back to like talking about these things, communicating more about like having situations where you can actually have conversations, because that changes minds, that opens up opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the big things still missing in this conversation is maybe, and this is something I've been wondering for a long time, because I think the search for community is so present in my own life also. Because I have this lack of belonging that I don't know if you feel it, but like I don't feel particularly belonging to any religion or nation, or I think the closest I have to belonging is like maybe the kind of the expat community in the larger sense, like people that have moved a lot, different countries, and maybe the scientific community, something like that. But regardless, I think this need for community, I think it's very, very very, very common. Like maybe even it's universal. I don't know. Probably it's universal. Like maybe some people don't have it, and because like even people that are like anti-mainstream, like whatever you call them, but there's certain people that want to do everything differently. They still do it to belong to the people that do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the old concept. Back in the days when I was in high school or middle school, there was this thing of like the way rebels. You dress. You belong to a
exactly.
It was a kind of early way of showing
for that. Sure. But the question now is, this is the real question for me: do we need the other side to feel like we belong? Does there need to be an other side? Because if there is, then I don't think this problem is solvable. Unless again, tangent. Maybe we should rename the podcast Tangents. So I really like post-apocalyptic movies or apocalyptic movies, and I think one of the reasons is that it's almost like in war, like let's say there's like an alien species coming that like attacks all humanity, like suddenly all the former enemies become friends because they have this bigger problem now. So that makes me wonder, I mean, I
Do we
think
need aliens?
Do we need aliens? Yeah, that's the whole thing, because like, and this was kind of like the whole story of the Nation video by Johnny Harris, which is the concept of a nation and a shared history and all this stuff was kind of invented to control the people back in like the early 20th century. And you know, it's what led to the two world wars. Basically, it's all like this whole national identity, which didn't even exist before. It's like, look, like the Germans said, oh look, all these Jews or all these French people or whatever, like they're not like us. Like we need to dominate the world.
That's basically throughout history always been us against them.
Exactly.
Right?
So is that problem actually solvable, or do we always need them?
It's a great question. Personally speaking, I've never been a great fan of like groups. So I like the idea. So I never really felt like, oh, I'm part of this group or the other group.
But do you also not have the need?
No, I mean, I really like the idea of like being in multiple groups and taking what I liked from each, but not being in one specifically, right? And so this kind of like, it's a more, unfortunately, I think, individualistic approach of like, I do my own thing and I take from here and there and I give back here and there. But like,
I think we both do that to some extent. But so what I realized about myself, and this goes back to psychology, because I think everything goes back to psychology. I still have a strong longing for it. Like I still have the strong need of belonging. I just didn't find it yet. And because like I have a hard time accepting a certain group's values completely, because there's always something I disagree with. And I think you have the same, right?
I think I gave up. Honestly, I gave up on like, I had this idea in mind earlier, like when I was younger, on creating my own group. Because like,
I mean, you still have that idea because we talk about it sometimes.
Yeah, but ultimately I kind of gave up and we're like, because it involves persuading people. It's a lot of work. And then for what? Like, but still, like taking my personal example, I guess, aside, it's a common theme. Like I understand the need for groups, and it's not that I don't have any. I have, but it's like aspect to aspect in life.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So that's fine.
But do you like deep down? Do you wish you had a group of people that were very similar to you?
I mean, yes, but I kind of gave up on the idea of having like a group of people that are very similar to me.
Just wondering if you have the need in general. Like if deep down you have.
I don't know. It's an interesting question, because maybe that has an impact and I don't even realize the fact that I don't have it. You know what I mean? Like, because it's true. There's like a human tendency.
In a way, I mean, maybe we that's the whole nuclear family kind of thing. Like we look for that in a partner to some extent, right? Like we want someone that fits us so well, which is getting harder and harder also at the same time. Yeah.
But that's one and like two people thing. It's not that it's complicated in itself, but it's not like I already wouldn't expect this from a family. Like if tomorrow I have a family, I would not expect that my kids were part of the same group, like 90% as me, right? In ideology and everything. I understand that it's not going to be the case, and it's fine. And I don't wish that. I mean, honestly, because diversity brings like enriches everything in a way, right? The diversity also of opinion and everything. This conversation, this discussion is important, and you only have it when you don't agree, right? And opens up new ideas, I think. So exchange and confrontation in a way, not peaceful confrontation, is very useful. Now, to answer it, no, I cannot answer it, but like to try and like on your point of like, do we need somebody else to like, because this idea of like us against them unites, it's true, but temporarily. Once this kind of like tension, like the example of the doomsday videos, like apocalyptic videos, right? Once the aliens are, like we win against the aliens or vice versa, there's not anymore like the like us against them. It goes back to
us against us.
Like, yeah.
So there's just a new them. Yeah. That's what I'm kind of saying. Like,
I look at things as a like, there's always, not always, but most of the time, I think there is a win-win situation that is not perfect for one and the other side, but is like good enough for both and kind of like removes the tension. Not every time. But the problem is some of the issues, like bigger issues in our world, I think they are so complicated and like have been like that for so long that the win-win is very hard to be even like, design as a, like, so that's that's a harder, longer conversation, I think. But in general, on the smaller scale, right? A person's life, I think the approach of looking at the end, like looking at the outcome that one wants, and like thinking back, what should I do to get to that outcome, is already a great exercise, and it can be applied on everything. And it takes a lot of effort, I think, to not be caught up into like the beliefs that one has, but just like purely neutrally thinking, okay, to get to this result. Like take, for instance, the because climate change is already an issue that is like, for the day-to-day life, what's the impact that's like, if we were to take like a couple of minutes, like on the climate change, right? Climate change is an issue that's impacting everyone. It's a strange issue, because what is really happening on a person's view, like on their life, what is happening right now due to climate change? Whether, I would say one thing is like whether it's completely in like uncontrolled weather changes, right? You have, sometimes you have like days that are like warmer and we're in winter. Sometimes like it rains for like full few days uncontrollably, right? These are, I think, are like the more tangible like impacts that's happening on a daily life of people like in the world, right? Then you have disasters, right? But disasters are not happening, fortunately, everywhere in the world, right? Here and there it happens more than before, but it's not something that like it's being perceived as like, the dismissal of disaster is like, oh, this was because the river was not being managed properly by the community, the local community. There could be multiple like justification, and then it goes back to the thing of the video of like, if you are educated enough, you can find justifications for pretty much anything, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
But the thing is like, okay, taking climate change, really, unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know, there's not like immediate impact on a day-to-day life that's tangible for everyone to like stop and consider. I watched a video in Italy. They made a video a couple of years ago about it was called Dryness. That's the title. And it was about like Rome and how like there was lack of water for like a year or something.
Yeah.
And the city completely changed. And then at the end of the video, it rains and yeah. But anyway, you see how that kind of like had a profound impact on people, because suddenly that was so. Yeah. So to connect it, the idea is like, you see these issues. And you know that there are issues. Unfortunately, on a day-to-day life, it doesn't have an impact. But the more you can bring it back to the impact on a day-to-day life of everyone, the more these issues gain size in everyone's eyes, and the more they can think of, like they are moved. They have the motivation to do something about it, to think about it. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I mean, so the thing they said in the video was that instead of focusing on the divisive rhetoric, like even the words climate change, because some people don't agree that there's a man-made climate change. They gave the example of, Floridians, from both sides of the aisle, so Republicans and Democrats working together to fight sea level rise. Like measures to fight sea level rise. So it's like sea level rise doesn't sound as inflammatory as climate change, because climate change has been used so often to have debates that focusing on the actual problems to solve locally is the way to go. And then I still think I'm still wondering, but I don't think we can answer this in this episode, but this whole idea of like, can we find belonging without othering? I think this is super interesting, because are we just condemned to always have war with each other, or is there a future where we all feel like we're the same and don't want to fight each other?
It's a good point. I think the example you gave is a great example, because what's the enemy there? The sea level rising, right? So you basically make the enemy the outcome that you don't want, and suddenly you're united, because both sides don't want their house to like be flooded, right? So the idea is like, okay, let's figure out something. And this exercise of like always thinking, it's like the thing with gun control, right? What is the issue? It's not gun control, is criminality, right? Is the fact that you want not to have, nobody wants criminal. I think we all agree. Yeah. So the outcome is the same that one wants. Yeah. But then how to reach it Yeah.
I don't think it's always the same, like, things like abortion and stuff, but I mean, yeah, you can always go back to more first.
But then I don't know, just my opinion, strongly my opinion, and that's it. On those things like euthanasia, I don't know how to say anything, euthanasia,
euthanasia, yeah, I think,
yeah, euthanasia,
abortion,
and abortion. The problem with those topics is that there's no one single answer. It's so case by case that course. You can't be pro or against, meaning that I think it's a personal choice. And so the answer there is like, we don't have to agree on a bigger scale. We need to like figure out a way so that people can decide on a smaller scale.
Yeah, but I mean, this is not the opinion of some people. Some people think it should be always forbidden, right? Like regardless of circumstances. Some people say there should be never an exception.
But then my question would be like, okay, think about it. If it were your case, like, why would you be against in your case? And then there's a conversation.
I know, but this is like a question of debate. Yeah. But I mean, in general, I agree with I think like using less inflammatory rhetoric, I think is good, and focusing on like the commonalities and so on. It's more like a philosophical wondering if we will always be condemned to hate someone, see someone as the other that we don't like. And
but then make that someone the problem, and not another person.
I think that's good. I wonder how we can practically do that. It's kind of like I guess it's like one of the oldest pieces of relationship advice of the book, which is it's not you against me, it's us against the problem. Like in a marriage, same thing, right? It's like, let's figure out the problem instead of let's tell each other how wrong we are. And but this is
also it's easier to go against a person. You have it there, and like it's an easier shortcut as well. And it's not.
But I think we need a few more episodes to to find practical solutions for this, because we can say all kinds of nice things that we wish were true for humanity, but to actually solve this problem, I think we need a lot more talking.
Yeah, no, and I like the idea of like thinking of practical day to day, because if one thing becomes, we love the idea of habits, right, and building habits, and we know that like a habit is basically something that like really can change and shift results. And so I think thinking about practical ways to
I think actually there's one thing that the video said, and I think it's actually super useful also from my personal life, which is what I took from the video also for myself, because I said after I watched the video, I was actually curious what, quote unquote, the other side says. So I think, and this is what they said at the end of the video, is that while numeracy and science, science literacy or something are correlated with stronger biases. So like the more educated you are, the more strongly your bias settles, which is kind of like counterintuitive. You think someone who's more scientific, they would like look at data and so on, but they become actually more polarized. But something that is not the case is that, or something else that is the case, is that someone who is science curious does not become more polarized. So I think something to foster is curiosity, because like I have this with friends of mine, and I think it's something I've been working on, and definitely work in progress. I'm definitely still very biased and opinionated in many things, and you and I, we know this. We have a lot of discussions about different things, but to be curious as to what's actually true, like instead of saying let me prove you wrong, to say, hey, let's find out together what is right. And I think this mindset can actually improve a lot.
Yeah, it's true, and it comes from
actually wanting to know.
Yeah, being open to like learning, because once you think you know enough, that's where you stop. I think thinking critically and start going autopilot. It's like I know how the world goes. I know how things are, you go autopilot, and
which
a way,
I definitely do. So
me too, a lot. But it's I think it's a selective focus. You can't not do that everywhere. It's impossible. So it's about like prioritizing, like where should I be curious and where I can avoid being curious. That's
I think, I mean, just for personal interactions, which, I mean, you and I, we have it a lot, but also I have it with other people. It's like when there's a disagreement, say, instead of saying, hey, I think you're wrong, to say, hey, I really care about this. You really care about this. Let's find out what's true. Instead of saying, let's find out who's right, because it doesn't matter. What matters is what's right, not who's right.
Yeah, and understanding the other person's whys is actually
exactly
like why are you thinking? Not just what are you thinking, but why. The reason behind is very important. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, man.